What if I told you in 80 years there could be no Trinidad and Tobago? And what if I told you Trinidad and Tobago isn't alone? Life is radically changing before our eyes. The temperatures are hotter now than they've ever been before.
So far for October, we've had some pretty rough weather over the weekend.
The storms are more devastating now than a decade ago. Life on a small island can sometimes save you from challenges bigger cities and bigger countries face. But not this one. All the evidence point to climate change. And it will affect everything, from what we wear, to what we eat, where we live, and how we live. Scientists say the world has warmed 1.3 degrees Celsius in the last 250 years. That could jump to 3 degrees Celsius by the year 2100. Rising sea levels would submerge Trinidad and Tobago. Yet, not everyone is convinced.
All of this with the global warming and that, a lot of it's a hoax. It's a hoax. I mean, it's a money-making industry, okay?
World leaders are descending on Glasgow for high-stakes talks.
This is the point of no return. We don't have a choice.
But unless major commitments are made and kept, the world could accelerate towards a climate catastrophe. It's difficult to overstate the critical juncture in history this generation of the world has arrived at. It's also difficult to put into words the importance of this moment for everyone watching tonight. Whether you're a student or a successful businessman, an engineer or a teacher, climate change is already affecting all of us. Good evening. My name is Ryan Bechu. Welcome to COP26 Now or Never. Over the last few months, we've heard different alarm bells ringing. The UN Secretary General warning the latest statistics are a code red for humanity, saying time is running out. I'm here tonight and will be here on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for the next 2 weeks to hopefully help you understand just how urgent this time we're living in is. And more so to give you a better understanding of why we need to reverse course now, of the children we leave at school or pass in the street. We'll live in a world so different than the ones we grew up in. It may be inhabitable. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres delivered one of his most frank statements yet at the opening of the conference today, warning we are digging our own graves.
We face a stark choice. Either we stop it or it stops us. And it's time to say enough. Enough of brutalizing biodiversity. Enough of killing ourselves with carbon. Enough of treating nature like a toilet. Enough of burning and drilling and mining our way deeper. We are digging our own graves.
Some strong statements from the UN Secretary General. Now, the first Caribbean leader to take the podium was Barbados Prime Minister MOTTLEY. Interestingly, she focused on the people who were not there as opposed to those who were there. They were out of sight but not out of mind. Listen.
Failure to provide the critical finance and that of loss and damage is measured, my friends, in lives and livelihoods in our communities. This is immoral and it is unjust. If Glasgow is to deliver on the promises of Paris, it must close these three gaps. So I ask to you, what must we say to our people living on the front line in the Caribbean, in Africa, in Latin America, in the Pacific, when both ambition and regrettably some of the needed faces at Glasgow are not present?
Some strong Caribbean leadership on show in Scotland. Coming up after the break, we speak to another regional voice that will be making a case on behalf of the Caribbean people. The United Nations Global Ambassador for Climate Change, Racquel Moses, sat down with us before jetting off to Glasgow. We bring you that interview next. Welcome back. You know, when it comes to climate change, the Caribbean is on the front lines of the disaster. Yet, in our small silo, we can be forgotten. That's where voices like MOTTLEY's, Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley's, and my next guest, their voices come in. Recently appointed a UN Global Ambassador for Climate Change, Racquel Moses is the Chief Executive Officer of the Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator. Her company helps transform the region's economy by fast-tracking public and private investment opportunities that support climate action and economic growth through sustainable development. We talked to her on a number of topics, including Trinidad and Tobago's contribution to climate change, where we go from here, and what case she will make on behalf of the people of the Caribbean in Glasgow. Racquel Moses, thank you so much for inviting us to your home.
Happy to have you.
Congratulations, by the way, on your new role as Global Ambassador to the United Nations for Climate Change.
Thank you so much.
So, climate change has arrived. Can we start by agreeing on that?
Absolutely.
Has Trinidad and Tobago taken the arrival of climate change seriously enough from where you sit?
You know, it's funny, I've just come off an interview with Sky News and the word enough was used in that interview as well. I think enough is a really, really high bar, but has Trinidad and Tobago taken it seriously? I think I'm seeing a lot of innovation in the private sector, certainly, and I'm seeing a lot of hope and willingness. But have we done enough? No, not yet. But I believe that there is the ability and the will to do enough. We are leading in the region in terms of green hydrogen development. We're one of very few projects. And so that is something that excites me. When I see an RFP for some solar at the airport, that excites me. But is it enough? No, not enough, not yet.
Are our average citizens aware that their lives are changing because of climate change right before their very eyes?
You know, I don't know that enough private citizens are aware of why some of the things that are happening and how these things affect their health and their ability to live and their livelihoods. I don't think enough of them are aware. And certainly that's one of the things that at the Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator we want to do, but we can't do everything. So, you know, information is key. Helping people get educated is key. Working as a region to build economies of scale so that the information access isn't borne as a burden on one country. All of those things are really, really necessary.
Has the Caribbean leadership been too slow out of the starting blocks in radically dealing with this climate crisis that only threatens to get worse?
I'd have to say no. I wouldn't say that we've been slow, but certainly we have been ill-equipped because we need, you know, they've just announced that the $100 billion commitment that the developed nations need to meet has finally been met. But that's just a start. The cost of climate adaptation alone is promised to be in the trillions of dollars across the globe. So we're going to need to see a lot more taking place. You know, MOTTLEY has made some very, very bold moves across the region. Prime Minister Andrew Holness as well. Prime Minister of Grenada, Mitchell, you know, you're seeing prime ministers across the region making a lot of bold commitments as well as actual work on the ground. Costa Rica, which doesn't get enough credit, is one of the few countries on the planet that can operate on 100% renewable energy. So we are doing great things, but we're just not moving fast enough, and it's a resourcing issue. So we need to solve that resourcing issue.
From where you sit, are nations like ours prepared for these drastic measures that could be implemented within 2 weeks?
I hope so. I hope so. You know, we've seen collaboration from some of the oil and gas companies, and we've seen them want to take on the transition that needs to take place. Nobody likes change, but also nobody wants to be the next Blockbuster. Nobody wants to be the next Kodak. We need to understand that the transition is already underway, and either we're with the change or we'll be left behind. So I think it's not a matter of whether or not you're willing to adapt to the changes that are taking place. It is how fast, and do you really want to remain a leader in the industry that you're in?
What case do you intend to make on behalf of the people of the Caribbean in Glasgow?
Certainly that we are incredibly vulnerable, but we are innovative and ready to deliver solutions to the world, that we need the funding, and much of that needs to be free money, because if we're talking about additional loans, we just don't have the debt capacity to take on additional debt to solve a problem that we didn't cause. So we absolutely want to lead from the region, provide solutions, use those solutions to create jobs in the region, but we absolutely have to have access to free money.
You traveled to Glasgow, Scotland. How confident are you that this could be fruitful? And how important is it that it is fruitful?
So this is the point of no return. We don't have a choice. You know, I go there with great hope and optimism, but also being realistic. I think that even as magnificent as Paris was, the reason that we are struggling at this point is because we haven't met the commitment necessary to achieve the objectives that we've set. We're on the wrong trajectory. But until and unless we remain hopeful and determined and action-oriented on measuring the changes that need to take place, we won't get there. So I refuse to believe that anything but positivity will come out of Glasgow because there is not another option.
Do we have any data at this point on any sea level rise in Trinidad and Tobago, and I'd even stretch that to across the Caribbean?
We're definitely seeing sea level rise across the region. It's not, you know, you're hearing people talk about, oh, well, with 1.5 degrees, you're going to see this much sea level rise. Sea level rise is happening now. Erosion of the coastal areas is happening now. People are being forced to move across the region now. These things are all happening already, and we absolutely need to see more adaptation. We need to see more, you know, people moving inland. And I know it's not easy. It's, you know, to tell somebody to pick up your home and to move, it's not an easy decision to make, but we have to provide support where people are willing.
Any personal goals or aspirations for Glasgow?
Yes, I definitely want to come back with more money assigned to the region and to be able to measure those funding flows on an active basis to the next COP. What we don't want is loose commitments or, yeah, okay, an additional 20 billion to the region, but we don't know who it's going to or how it's going. So we definitely want to tie down some details around the funding flows.
What do you hope in between this COP and next COP is realized?
That we actually close on the commitments that are made. Let's see the countries hit the targets that they've set and continue to make progress. This COP needs to be a tipping point. It needs to be the point from which we look back and say, that was when we all got absolutely serious. And that was when we started to reclaim the future that we deserve.
Racquel Moses, you take our best wishes to Glasgow with you.
Thank you.
Indeed, we wish her the best of luck as she settles in for one of the most important meetings of her career. Thank you, Racquel Moses. Coming up, another important voice joins us. Chief Climatologist at the TNT Met Office, Mr. Kenneth Kerr, talks to us about how climate change is already here in Trinidad and Tobago and how it is making itself at home. Welcome back. It's been a dramatic start to the Conference of Parties 26 in Glasgow, Scotland, with the United Kingdom Prime Minister, the UN Secretary General and the Barbados Prime Minister delivering stinging statements and demanding action that has either been ignored or kicked down the road. Now, whatever those actions look like, it will surely have implications for this country. Barbados Prime Minister MOTTLEY painted a picture of how life in the Caribbean is unfolding before our eyes. Here to broaden that picture, we've invited the Chief Climatologist at the TNT Met Office, Kenneth Kerr. But before we bring him in, Trinidad and Tobago was the first Caribbean country to commit to the 2015 Paris Agreement. But what has the United Nations made of our progress so far? Peter Christopher answered that question.
One of the major shortcomings in the world's attempt to reduce its carbon footprint has been a data shortage about emissions in recent years. Trinidad and Tobago, like much of the world, lacks updated numbers. Kishan Kumar Singh, head of the Multilateral Environmental Agreements Unit of the Ministry of Planning, confirmed the government could not state what effect the recent lockdowns had on our emissions, or even the impact of increased sales of hybrids and CNG vehicles while tax exemptions were in place. But the United Nations is working with Trinidad and Tobago to fix this. According to Randy Davis, resident representative for the UNDP Trinidad and Tobago, the government is currently updating the total national emissions data in partnership with UNDP via the greenhouse gas inventory. She says this includes its ability to measure, report, and verify its greenhouse gas emissions across the sectors. In addition, work has been undertaken in the renewable energy and energy efficiency arenas focused on solar power and energy efficiency in the refrigeration and air conditioning sectors. Trinidad and Tobago's current commitment is to reduce emissions in transport, power, and industry by 2030. Davis confirmed when Trinidad and Tobago made its commitments to the Paris Agreement, the transportation sector accounted for 8% of emissions, which equates to roughly 2.7 million tons of carbon dioxide. She says Trinidad and Tobago has been making strides in the right direction, hailing the recent tax exemption for electric vehicles announced in the budget. Davis says a priority area is the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions generated from the transport sector, which accounts for between 15 and 20% of all global emissions each year. She explains Trinidad and Tobago has already built the foundation for this, and we see this with the launch of important new initiatives to introduce renewables and, of course, incentivize electric vehicles. We anticipate after the COP26 that all countries will accelerate the process. Peter Christopher, CNC3 News.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Peter, for your reporting on that story. Now, I want to welcome the Chief Climatologist at the Met Office, Mr. Kenneth Kerr. Mr. Kerr, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yes, good evening, and thank you, Ryan.
You know, Mr. Kerr, what significance or importance is this COP26 meeting to you and the organization you work for?
Well, it has significant implications and impact because we are charged with being at the center as the government trigger for counter-disaster measures when it comes to hydrometeorological events. And our work has been unfolding in a way that has increased substantially because of the amount of hydrometeorological hazards that continue to threaten our country. And therefore, any intervention globally, regionally, and nationally that will assist in reducing the magnitude and the events of climate change will greatly impact on our work as well. And there are significant responses that we would have to make when it comes to research and development in this regard.
Yeah, important points you made. The first one I want to touch on is we've seen temperature changes in Trinidad and Tobago over the last few decades. What type of changes have we seen?
Well, we have had an average change in the magnitude of the temperature change that we have witnessed since 1946 to now. We saw a change of 0.28 per decade from 1946 to now. But since 1991, we have seen an increase in that the decadal change is now 0.32. It may sound as though it's not significant, 0.4 degrees change, 0.04, sorry, but that's a significant change when it comes to global climate change.
Yeah, how significant is this when it comes to being matched up against the IPCC reports?
Well, every iota of warming becomes significant when it comes to the limit of 1.5 that we as Caribbean small island developing states are trying and hoping that the globe could achieve by limiting it to 1.5. We are at 1.1. So every increment of warming matters now because it will mean that we can kick the can further down the road, so to speak.
Yeah, you know, Mr. Kerr, I was mentioning a little bit earlier on in the show that, trying to break it down, that these rising temperatures, we all can already feel its impact and the effects it's having on our everyday lives, really. The sun is hotter, the storms are more violent. What impact will these what you call, small significant increases in temperature have on Trinbagonians, everyday Trinbagonians, when it comes to things like agriculture, what we call bushfires? What impact will it have on different sectors of our societies?
Significant impacts, Ryan. Let me just put it in perspective. And a key indicator is hot days. And for us in Trinidad and Tobago, a hot day is a temperature at 34 degrees or greater. And between 2011 to 2020, the last decade, we have had 415 of these days compared to the decade before that when we had 385. And the decade before that when we had 175. So we are seeing a galloping, an acceleration of hot days. And this has serious implications for the agriculture sector. It means that evaporation of water is going to take place at a more rapid rate. It means that livestock will have to be cooled a little more frequent, or their ability to withstand the heat will become a key factor in the whole agriculture spectrum. When it comes to water, it means that evaporation from our reservoirs are going to add to the fact that we have droughts and dry spells occurring, and it's going to impact these events more severely and make them more impactful. And then there's the fires that goes along with that. So these heat events that we are calling them will transcend to significant costs for the country, including in the energy sector, where people are going to need greater cooling. And if you are going to request greater cooling from TNTech and the others, then you are going to be using more energy. And if you are going to be using more energy to air condition units, then you're also contributing in a feedback loop to the global climate change problem of greenhouse gas emissions.
Wow. You've talked a lot about the heat there, Mr. Kerr. What about how has rainfall patterns changed in Trinidad and Tobago over the last few decades? And what does the IPCC project?
Well, there's a natural relationship between the heat that we are experiencing globally and the water vapor capacity in the atmosphere, because the water vapor relative humidity is directly linked to a temperature. And the greater the temperature, then the ability of the atmosphere to absorb or hold more water increases. And therefore, once that increases, then the ability to rain also, in fact, rain heavily or rain heavily becomes more potent. And from that perspective, we are seeing here in Trinidad and Tobago that the extreme rainfall events are becoming more frequent. The maximum one-day rainfall totals have increased. The maximum 3-day totals have increased. The maximum 5-day totals have increased. The top 1%, the top wettest days have also been contributing more rainfall to the annual totals. So that has a knock-on effect for flooding, and we are seeing that as well. We have also noticed a shift in the rainfall patterns in that August is now the wettest month at Piarco, and we have seen a natural increasing trend in October rainfall, and we have witnessed as well that knock-on effect having more flood events in October as well. So Trinidad and Tobago's experience is an experience of climate change when it comes to the climate.
Yeah, you're talking about these changing weather patterns. How is the Met Office, of which companies like us, all the media in Trinidad and Tobago depend on you guys, a lot of other people depend as well. How have you guys been changing, your methods of data collection? How rapidly do you have to change? How are you keeping up with climate change?
Well, this is an easy one for us, because we have to adhere to global standards. We have to have the robustness. We are not like the other entities. We have to ensure that our information, our data can stand scrutiny. So we maintain our standards. In terms of early warning, we have reinvented and repositioned how we warn. We are now warning based on the Common Alert Protocol, the global standard that is color-coded. We have included not so much what the weather will do to us, but not so much what the weather will be, but what the weather will do. So we have gone to impact-based forecasting, indicating to the citizens what will happen to your community when these events come, so that they can better prepared and better plan. And we have had as well what we call a National Climate Outlook Forum that gives you pre-warning, so that when the weather event actually occurs, you are in a better position. It means, therefore, that citizens have to move the envelope forward in looking at the climate and the weather together so that there can be a seamless preparation when it comes to reducing our risk from these hydrometeorological and climate hazards.
Mr. Kenneth Kerr, you took some time out of your very busy day to talk to us tonight, and we really appreciate it. Thank you for making yourself available, and we do hope that you will visit us again very soon.
Thank you, Ryan. It's a pleasure.
Mr. Kenneth Kerr, the Chief Climatologist at the TNT Met Office, talking to us some very salient points there. And like I mentioned, it's there for everyone to feel, it's there for everyone to see. You don't have to be living in a particular area. Climate change is already affecting you wherever you are. On coastlines across Trinidad and Tobago, some people have already been forced to move. We're feeling how hot the sun is, or how hotter the sun is than it was years before. When rain falls, it almost feels like it's torrential rainfall. The point of our show over the next 6 shows, over the next 2 weeks, is to help you further understand that climate change has already arrived, that climate change is already affecting your life, but it is not too late. In the daily things that we do, we'll be able to help reverse the course of climate change, and we do hope that you stay with us over the next 6 shows. We'll be back on Wednesday. Thank you so much for spending your Monday evening with us. Thank you, and have a good night.